North of Spool Swamp lies Tarm Ruins. 4 unique jewels are required to open this ancient gate, which will lead us into the Lost Woods. But after navigating both the woods and the seasons themselves alike, we'll eventually find ourselves at the northwesternmost corner of Holodrum. High upon the peak of the mountain, we'll find a massive tower, which will serve as the next dungeon. Welcome to the Ancient Ruins. A rather uninteresting name for such a good dungeon, if you ask me. Ancient Ruins just sounds generic, like it was a placeholder name that they left in there, which is surprising given the naming conventions of this game have otherwise been either an allusion to the layout or at least relevant to its location in some way. I would have called it something like Tarm Tower, but I digress. Overall though, the dungeon does have strong theming. The color palette and architecture evoke, well, ancient ruins, I guess. But specifically, I get a desert temple sort of vibe from the place. The walls and floors have that beigey color that makes it look like sandstone, and the place is brimming with traps more than any other of Season's dungeons so far. Avoiding traps feels like a core theme here. Between that and the enemies present here, such as the Gibdos, Stalfos, Keese, Armo statues that come to life, and snakes.
Actually, those are called...
Shh. I know they're called ropes. This feels like the sort of place you'd see in an Indiana Jones film, and I mean that in the best way. The only issue is that this sort of leads to something of an identity crisis within the dungeon. It feels so much like a decrepit desert temple, but its placement is on the opposite side of the overworld map from the desert. We get here by crossing through the Lost Woods and climbing the mountain. It's bizarre. I think this is a good dungeon, but it also feels out of place in a way. This is a pretty large dungeon, much larger than Unicorn's Cave and even a bit bigger than Dancing Dragon. There's a total of 45 standard-sized rooms, 46 if you count the rooftop balcony where we get the essence, with the largest being the bottom floor, and each floor getting a bit smaller as you go up. I would hazard a guess, based on the way the floor sizes shrink going up, that the dungeon was initially conceived as a pyramid when planning, but that this ended up not quite being feasible as the game was beholden to the grid of the dungeon map. That's just a guess though. Between that and the architecture I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that this dungeon was moved sometime during development. Maybe it was originally meant to be in the desert. Who knows? The music is also just okay. It isn't super catchy like the last 2 dungeons, but it also doesn't get annoying. It does manage to fit the mysterious vibe pretty well though. So yeah, it's decent. A good mid-tier dungeon theme. Mysterious and not too intrusive. As for progression, this is really where the Ancient Ruins shines. The dungeon being a tower is reflected both in the layout as well as the exterior of the entrance. I'm not sure what it is, but tower dungeons are always fun. The first floor is a bit more exploration focused, being an open space that allows you to explore, unravel, and loop about a key central area. After that, the floors upstairs get a little more linear, though they're not without some backtracking and zigzagging around. Many of the puzzle mechanics found here act sort of as sequels to those we've seen before, building off of concepts introduced in previous dungeons, and that's not a bad thing. The difficulty is escalating in this dungeon. Notably, on the first floor, the turnstile makes a return, and it is implemented wonderfully. Pretty well the entirety of floor 1's navigation is designed around this thing, and as I mentioned when we were looking at Snake's Remains, I I adore this mechanic. The room layouts loop back in on themselves in both directions, with the western passage being obstructed by a critically placed locked block. Learning to manipulate this turnstile to your advantage and approach it from the correct direction is crucial to successfully navigating through the first floor, and it becomes so immensely satisfying to do, especially once you have the small key that you need to open that western passage up. We also get a fair amount of magnetic glove puzzles, though it's not used for traversal as much this time around, but there are a bunch of orbs to place onto switches. Of course, as tower dungeons tend to, it uses verticality quite effectively, building off of the puzzles from Poison Moth's lair, frequently having us drop down to lower floors and having to move trampolines into position to bounce back up to the correct spot of the floor above. It's good stuff. Tucked in the southeastern corner of floor 3 is the dungeon item, the magical boomerang. It is functionally just an upgrade for your existing boomerang, outright replacing it in your inventory, but it is a pretty big change. The magical boomerang can be controlled directly by holding the button and using the D-pad to manipulate it, making it useful for puzzles. It's pretty cool, honestly. Though I find it a bit tricky to control, it's a great idea and implemented as well as it could be for the hardware, with gem switches strategically placed over chasms and around obstacles. But with the power of hindsight, I think this is one thing that gets iterated on nicely in later games, such as the DS Zelda titles, which had a more intuitive control scheme for this item specifically. It also packs more of a punch than your old boomerang, being strong enough to kill tough enemies like the Armos that spring to life in the very room that you find it in. As a bit of a side note, I feel like they make you fight or at least encounter a bunch of Armos without it, just to make using the boomerang more satisfying. And if that is the case, then they succeeded. It totally works. It always feels good to find a weapon that makes tough enemies go down faster. The dungeon mid-boss is the Vire, and he's fine. He's a recycled mid-boss based on the Vire from Link's Awakening. Really, all you have to do is keep your sword ready, be patient, and wait for him to get close to you, and he'll go down pretty fast, especially if you got the noble sword before this dungeon. But yeah, Vire is a bit mediocre in terms of mid-bosses. Not bad, just not great either. I mentioned before that a big part of the dungeon's theming is all about avoiding traps, and I stand by that. There's a ton of these. From basic spikes in the floor, to blade traps, to rolling spike traps, Armos that come to life, ambushing you, and arrows being shot from the walls. It makes for a dangerous dungeon setting for sure, but it's also mechanically and thematically a nice shakeup. All of this culminates in a huge set piece, one that rewards us with the boss key. Feeding into that Indiana Jones vibe, the game presents to us this tantalizing giant rupee. When you grab the rupee, the trap activates. You have to quickly make your way through this huge obstacle course-like room filled with hazards. All the while, the room itself starts collapsing, the walls closing in around you. It's almost like an escape sequence, but on a smaller scale. If you don't get there in time, then you get squashed. This is cool. You don't see this type of thing in a Zelda dungeon often. It's just a nice bit of tension before you get the boss key and finish up the dungeon. With all of that said, once we have made our way past all of these obstacles and traps and completed this little puzzle on the top floor, we can confront the dungeon boss. Lying in wait for us is Manhandla. And this is an interesting reinterpretation of this boss, though not my favorite if I'm being honest. In comparison to its NES counterpart, this is for sure an improvement. But later games like Echoes of Wisdom and even the Four Swords games, I think end up offering more fleshed out and interesting versions of the boss. But I digress. I definitely like the visual improvements here over the original NES appearance. The main body, stem of the plant opponent resembles a buzz blob and even electrocutes you, so you'll want to make use of that newly acquired magic boomerang to keep some distance. The heads, or flowers I guess, look like basically piranha plants, which I guess is in line with how the original Zelda 1 manual described Manhandla anyways. They even spit fireballs. So yeah, in essence, you gotta use your boomerang to destroy the 4 heads, then strike at the body to reveal its final weak point, and deliver the coup de grace. Simple enough. The main challenge here comes from how difficult the arena is to maneuver around in, since half of the room has this shifting treadmill floor. I will give Manhandla some credit though, they're the first dungeon boss in this game to actually genuinely drop my hearts down to 0. I don't remember them giving me this much trouble on previous playthroughs, but hey, here we are. I kind of like them all the more just for that. But I don't really have much more to say about Manhandla. It's mid-tier in how I would rank the bosses in this game, as well as in how I would rank Manhandla's series-wide appearances. Not bad by any means, but not great, just squarely good. Once he's defeated, we'll be able to head up to the rooftop and find the Blowing Wind, the 6th essence of nature. So overall, Ancient Ruins is a competently designed dungeon. It has a lot of great set pieces and good puzzles. My main point of contention with the dungeon is that it feels thematically at odds with itself, like it was a dungeon meant for a different part of the game or something. One that got repurposed or just moved around at some point during development. I don't know that for sure, it's just how it feels playing through here. But taken in isolation, judged on its own merits, I still think this dungeon is great. That thematic incongruity is not anywhere near enough to hold it back. A few more thoughts I have. In the southeast corner of floor 2 is a completely pointless trap room. I don't like that. I guess I'm of the mindset that exploring every corner of a dungeon should be rewarded, though I guess it could be argued that it is on brand for the dungeon's trap-filled theme. I would just rather there still be something in there, even if it were an optional treasure chest with money. On the flip side, there is a hidden room on floor 1, just below here, that sort of balances it out as a secret cash-filled room. Also, there is this room with the super fast green blade traps. This is the first time I've seen this game lag and drop frames. I guess it's just a little too much for the Game Boy to handle. It's not even that there's a lot going on in here, I don't think so at least. Maybe the overall speed of the blade traps just pushes the hardware to its limits. All that aside, I do think that the best part of this dungeon overall is just how effectively it makes use of its space, especially that verticality. Something about dropping to the floor below, then repositioning the trampolines to bounce back upstairs to the correct spot in order to complete a puzzle is so satisfying. And of course, the use of the turnstile in the early moments of this dungeon is just fantastic. Both of these are great ways to test the player's spatial awareness, even more so than what we saw in Poison Moth's Lair. I just love this stuff. Plus, I appreciate that we get a nice balance of open floor plan, especially on the bottom floor, and tight linear segments upstairs. But of course, vibes are so important. I am a sucker for a dungeon with a good sense of atmosphere, and I think that plays a big part in how this dungeon excels. It being so filled with hazards and traps makes the player feel like an archaeologist exploring a dangerous, forbidden, forgotten place. As I said earlier in this video, it's that Indiana Jones vibe, a feeling I don't think the series would fully embrace again until Tears of the Kingdom's Lightning Temple. So while it's a bit out of place feeling in some ways, this dungeon is overall solid. I like it a lot. Thank you so much for watching. A huge special thanks goes out to my channel members here on YouTube as well as my supporters on Patreon, the names of which you're seeing on screen right now. You all are awesome. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye.